Hello, welcome to Casual Veteran Gamer, and in the video today I'm going to be showing you a build that a commenter gave. They like to call it the Death Knight. So I've named my character Death KnighTav. The background is a soldier. Race is Githyanki to get proficiency in the greatsword and medium armour. Their appearance, they suggest having a kind of deathly sort of looking face with a skull tattoo, kind of looking pale like a corpse. I don't often change the appearance of my characters, so this is all a bit new to me. Makeup style none, tattoo 6, hair colour grey 1, hairstyle 10, eye colour I went for grey 1 also, and then skin colour ice tone 1. The class will be a Warlock of the Fiend. Cantrips, they suggest either Chill Touch and Eldritch Blast maybe at level 1, and maybe Friends at level 4. I'm actually going to put Friends at level 1 and get Eldritch Blast at level 1, and then maybe pick up Chill Touch at level 4. Spells, the whole idea here is that this Githyanki is going to be jumping into battle, going to use Arms of Hadar, going to be using a greatsword, and we will be using Hex. Maybe at a later level I'll pick up Armour of Agathis, but at level 1 I'm just going to try Arms of Hadar and Hex. As for skills, we get Deception and Arcana from the class. Background as a soldier is Athletics and Intimidation, and then they suggest Investigation as well. For abilities, a slightly strange spread, or might seem strange at first, but it will become apparent why we're doing this later. Strength at 17, Dexterity at 8. Oh, this is one of the only times I'm going to probably do this. The point here is we will be using heavy armor at level 4, which will put up strength to 18 and make up for our lack of armor class. Constitution 14, Intelligence 9, Wisdom 10, Charisma 15 as hard as it goes, but we will be using Volo's Ersatz eye yet again for another Warlock. This will put Intelligence down to 8, however the difference between 8 and 9 is negligible, but getting Charisma up to 16 will be important. After killing Commander Zolk and getting off the Nautiloid, you'll find yourself at level 2. Pick up the Everburn Blade, and the person who made this build says that we should pick up Devil's Sight, which makes up for the fact that Githyanki do not have Dark Vision, and they suggested Fiendish Vigor, and spells, third spell that they suggested is Armour of Agathis. There is a little bit of overlap with temporary hit points here, but this is what the person said to do. At level 3 there's not much to choose really. There's only one pact that we can choose at the moment, which is Pact of the Chain, so this is where we get our imp. We get a spell to choose. They said choose whatever you want. I like the idea of Shatter. I'm not going to choose a replacement spell this level. And at level 3, it doesn't really say it here, but at level 3 we get the jump spell because of the Githyanki racial trait. Here we are at level 4. We get a choice of a new cantrip. I'm going to pick Chill Touch here. We get a new spell. There are several good choices. Misty Step's never a bad choice, but there is a necklace that we'll get from the Goblin Camp that will give us Misty Step, so I might not choose that. Scorching Ray isn't a bad idea, except this Warlock is going to be going into combat, in melee combat, so I'd probably choose Mirror Image. And we get a replacement spell, and considering we get False Life, this isn't something that the commenter, the person who came up with this, said to do, but I would probably advise taking out Armour of Agathis, maybe sticking Hellish Rebuke, not a bad choice, sticking something else that you want. The reason for this is we have the Dark One's Blessing that gives us temporary hit points, and we've got essentially a ritual of False Life, like we can cast False Life without using a spell slot to give us temporary hit points also. Armour of Agathis triples up on the temporary hit points, and they don't stack, they don't add up together, so it's pointless having 3 lots of sources of temporary hit points, which is why I would advise not to take Armour of Agathis, or maybe swap it out later, such as I'm doing. Then for the feats, this is where everything comes together really. We're going to take Heavily Armoured. To be able to take Heavily Armoured, you must be proficient in medium armour. It doesn't tell you that, but that is something we do need. And there are 2 reasons for this. One, it puts our strength up by 1 up to 18. So now we're fairly powerful. I mean, we've got a high strength ability score, and we're proficient with heavy armour, which means that we don't lose any armor class because of the dexterity. Mr. Patrick 5333 didn't mention getting the Gloves of Power, and I've mentioned it in other videos, but if you're okay having someone branded, this is an excellent item. If you don't want to be branded, do not put them on, because you'll get Bane cast on yourself instead of the enemy. For this build, you will once again need the Ersatz eye from Volo, and if you go to pickpocket him, you'll see his whole inventory, so you can take some gold, the Whispering Promise, but I'm just here for the eye. There we are. I may have used an invisibility spell just to make things even easier on myself. We'll now go to the Warlock. They can use the eye. We now can see that the charisma of the Warlock is 18, Intelligence has gone down to 8, but that doesn't matter when you start at 9 already. So now all of our charisma checks are going to be slightly better, but more importantly, any saving throws from our spells and the attack roll from Eldritch Blast, if we need it, will be 1 higher. One of the items suggested for the build is the necklace that Korga has, which is called Broodmother's Revenge. Unfortunately, we cannot pickpocket it. We have to kill Korga for it. So I'll do that and then show you what it does. So here we have Korga, and on her body, Broodmother's Revenge. Whenever the wearer is healed, its weapon drips with poison and deals additional poison damage. The Warlock here has the necklace equipped, and I'll try and heal myself with a potion of healing. But I think this might be one downside to the Everburn Blade, is it looks like there won't be any extra poison damage when I hit. Just some fire and slashing damage there. One other item that has been called for is Crusher's Ring, and I wholly agree with this. If you get Crusher to kiss your foot through intimidation and maybe using the tadpole power or just intimidation alone, he comes out here to relieve himself, which then leaves him all alone and will allow you to kill him and take his ring. You cannot pickpocket it off him, just like with Korga's necklace. So here's poor Crusher, here's his ring, movement speed plus 10 feet or plus 3 meters if you are measuring in metric units. The second ring was suggested to be the Ring of Poison Resistance. This is just generally a good ring. It's nice for someone to have to be resistant to poison damage. When you initially come to the Goblin Camp, it's probably a good idea to come in peacefully, because there is a trader in here that normally has some heavy armour on them, which is the best heavy armour we can currently get. One of the downsides of heavy armour in early access is that there isn't a great selection. We've only got a choice of the 2 worst types of heavy armour that are available in D&D. Anyway, here is the trader. Let's see their wares. And here it is, chainmail, 880 gold pieces. So currently our armor class is 14, which is low for a melee combatant. This goes up to 16, which it's okay. Ideally, it would be higher, either from high dexterity, medium armor, or a shield. But 16 is the best we're going to get in early access. So this is now essentially the complete build, except for I haven't gone and got the necklace that can give Misty Step. So we have a level 4 Warlock, 18 strength, 16 charisma. Those are 2 good, especially the strength, good attacking stats. One downside to this is dexterity is -1, so initiative is -1. So this character is more likely to be going towards the end of a turn order. One thing the commenter, Mr. Patrick5333, commented in his description of the build is that if you can, and when you can, you should cast Jump before you get into combat. Now, having played through EA many times, I know when most of the combats are now. As we go through the game, that might not be so obvious, but let's try it out. We've only got 10 turns of Jump, so you need to do it just before you go in. Could have even started a bit closer. And we'll see how it does in combat. I don't think anyone can argue with the effectiveness of Jump. I mean, with the jump action, bonus action now, I can get to anywhere on the battlefield that I want. So definitely agree with that. Let's go to here, let's take out this archer. You probably won't want to be using Jump every single turn, because now I can't use Hex because I don't have that extra bonus action. And speaking of Hex, this is something you should still be trying to use. You are still a Warlock. It's a fairly unique spell to Warlocks. Since I'm here with a slashing weapon, can have a go at trying to kill both of them, but I hit the target that was hexed, so the damage there was even nicer than normal. So now I've pretty much gone and got all of the equipment that was suggested to me. I'm going to test this out first of all against Minthara, so I'm going to cast Jump ahead of time. Gotta jump in because I can. I've already used Hex in a previous short rest, so I don't need to save a spell slot for Hex, probably. And I'm going to start off with the Arms of Hadar. One thing never to forget is that one thing the Warlock comes with is Find Familiar, and that Imp's a really good choice. The Quasit isn't so bad either. So I'm going to use Hex again. This is the main part of the mainstay of the damage. 8 slashing damage, that's actually lower than average. 12 damage, which is okay, could be better. So on Minthara's body, that is the Amulet of Misty Step. I won't equip that during the battle because that uses an action. And since we're here, Minthara's weapon, Cyanide, is a really good support weapon. doesn't do a lot of damage, but it has the chance to inflict fairy fire on an enemy, which doesn't require concentration from the weapon. Now, since I use jump, I can actually go and get to the next enemy. However, because I use my bonus action, I cannot use Hex this turn. And since I've got Crusher's Ring, I've still got some movement left. And since I'm here and I've picked Hellish Rebuke, I'm assuming this goblin's going to hit me. There we are. That's why I've got Hellish Rebuke. Unfortunately missed by 1 hit point. Not missed, but it's got 1 hit point left. Now from that fight, I'm slightly impressed. The damage was good enough. Damage is on par with all the other characters, I would say. One thing I wish I'd had is a way to do more attacks, such as Action Surge or Great Weapon Master. Considering we are in melee, that would be nice. At level 4, it's not so much of a problem. However, the martial classes, fighters, rangers, paladins, when we get there, will be getting a second attack at level 5, whereas this current setup for Warlock will not. We'll be stuck with a single attack in a turn. For this next fight, I haven't taken a long rest from the previous one. I took a short rest, which is what Warlocks rely on. And I'm here and I'm going to fight Anders. So here's one of the downsides. This won't happen every single fight, but it's not necessarily a coincidence that our Death Knight is going last. So it's now the Death Knight's turn. I've already taken a bit of movement. One downside to the Arms of Hadar is that it will attack allies. So this is one situation where I cannot use it, even though I would want to. But I can still use Hex. And because of the greatsword, I can use Cleave. And 1 hit point short again. That's just unlucky, really. Just back to my Death Knight. Using Hex, nice and standard. I've put up Invoke Duplicity, so now I have advantage on the attack. That's just a bit unlucky, really. And yeah, we get the Dark One's blessing there, which is why we don't really need Armour of Agathis. I haven't actually ended up using any of my spell slots yet. With this Amulet of Misty Step, it's nice and powerful. Brings us out here. Being a Warlock, do this. Nice thing about Hellish Rebuke is that it doesn't require an attack roll. You can just damage them. Now I don't have the jump spell, but with such a high strength, it is possible to jump a long way anyway. And this is probably a good time to use Arms of Hadar, because otherwise I have to get rid of potentially 3 mirror images. Also not a bad time to use Shatter. There we are, down they go. This time I'm in the fight against the Minotaurs. And again, Death Knight's towards the end of the combat order, initiative order. Now one thing that I feel like is lacking a bit is the lack of ability of this build to do anything else apart from do damage. Damage is great, but something like a Battle Master can disarm foes, can scare them. Clerics have generally got utility all around, bless, healing and damage. And here we've got Invoke Duplicity from this particular subclass. Although granted, the Warlock does get the Imp, which is great. Rogues, either, here I've got an Arcane Trickster, so maybe not right now, but I've got Sleep and Colour Spray, whereas the Warlock is pretty much a one-trick pony. It's not bad at what it does, it can do damage just fine, but I would rather there was something extra on top of just whacking with the greatsword. One thing I haven't really shown in this build, in this video, is the fact that it does have a ranged attack, it does have Eldritch Blast, but without having Agonizing Blast, it's not really much better than just a heavy crossbow, although of course this build doesn't have a good dexterity. So if I was to make some changes to this build, I'd probably give it Sword of Anders, and maybe switch out the False Life Invocation, and maybe switch Armour of Agathis back in. Also, the armor class is lacking a bit. I have found that they're taking a few more hits than I would like as a melee combatant. Now I've got a spare bonus action for once, because I've got advantage from Invoke Duplicity. They are already hexed. And I just want to point something out about the Everburn Blade. So that's 2d6 plus 4 plus 1d4, which is great. If I use some basic poison, it doesn't actually add any poison damage, which is another reason the Sword of Anders I think would be better here. Also taking the Invocation, which gives Devil's Sight, isn't really very useful if we're not going to be using Eldritch Blast very much, because once we get into melee range, the number of times that enemies are obscured by shadows isn't as high. But I will say that if Darkness interacted with Devil's Sight, as it does in D&D, it'd be a great choice, because then the Warlock could set up darkness and attack from being unseen, attack from hidden essentially, while enemies are in the darkness. So is this build optimal? No. Is the build viable? Yes. One good thing about D&D in general is that most builds are viable. It's quite difficult to come up with a build that doesn't work. As long as your attacking stat is high, it's quite difficult to do badly. Here we are for once, getting Eldritch Blast in, which is nice, but it's only ever going to be 1d10 before level 5. At level 5 it would be 2 Eldritch Blasts that we would cast. Would I recommend this? I'd recommend this if this was the sort of build you haven't tried before, you know, run out of ideas. This is something a little bit different, not quite the same as the other builds I've put out, which is a nice change. So let me know what you think of this build. What would you change? Would you even consider this build? I know plenty of people will dislike the fact that dexterity is at 8 and the -1 modifier, but inside heavy armor it's not so bad, but obviously our initiative is still at a -1. If you made it this far, please consider subscribing. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.